Why journaling should our risk support? How can we change that? Really, awareness and expression of what we're feeling and thinking. We gain better clarity, insight, and understanding and acceptance of ourselves and our. Only in awareness and acceptance of our current state of where are we at? Like getting to know where you're really at, what do you want in your life, how you feel. Only in accepting awareness can we make real change and heal ourselves.
My name is Claudette Graham, and I'm the Director of Education at the West Indian Social Club of Hartford. This evening, we're continuing our part two. We're continuing the series on mental illness and wellness, and this is part two of the collaborative effort between the West Indian Social Club and Wheeler Health, formerly Wheeler Clinic. The objective of this venture is to reach out to our community and to have a discussion, a talk, a conversation about mental health and wellness. It is no secret that for many in our community, mental illness is a stigma, and at many times it's a taboo to even mention or acknowledge that it exists in our families. Our objective tonight for this series is to continue to normalize and destigmatize mental illness, and to acknowledge that it's a reality. And so for this evening, we continue our program. We're on to part two of our program. The earlier section, we focused on yoga and journaling, and it was well attended and it was well received, and we had a great time. Now we're segueing to the clinical section of our program, where we will have a discussion on mental illness, and the general overarching topic of this series is Seasonal Affective Disorder, or S.A.D for short. And so Dr. Rhule will be here to discuss it from a clinical perspective. Dr. Gary Rhule, MD, MPH, is co-chair Health Sector, Jamaica Northeast, Northeast of the diaspora, of the Jamaican diaspora. He's an internal medicine physician, public health practitioner, and mental health advocate. He is a former director of Health and Human Services for the city of Hartford, Connecticut. He's an active member of the community and serves on several nonprofit organizations, including the National Alliance on Mental Health and Mental Illness Connecticut chapter, the Jacobs L. Lewis Fox Foundation, the West Indian Foundation, and the West Indian Social Club, to name a few. He's also an author. His book, Sailing on Broken Pieces, depicts his relationship with his mentally ill brother. The book is now available on Amazon. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Gary Rhule. Dr. Rhule, take it away.
Thank you, Claudette, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope that I hope and I know the yoga and the journaling session was fantastic. I just kind of overheard the last couple of minutes on the journaling section. And I wish I could have been there in person to be part of that, but that's fantastic. Happy New Year again, and thanks for joining us today. I have slides that I'm going to share, but I'm going to go through those, I think, fairly briskly, because what I want you to do, I like the fact that you guys are in a circle, right? Really kind of communing with us, and then really opening it up for questions and answers, really. So I'll share my slides on Zoom. Let me see if I can do that. And if not, I will just talk. Just talk directly. Let's see if I can do that. I think I can't, which is actually okay. Let's just talk. Okay, so, really mental health, I'll just start really broadly, right? So mental health is something that we all have, right? So mental health and good mental health just means how your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your behavior, your personality helps you to cope with everything that we deal with in life, right? So whether you're a young infant, a newborn, a young infant, a child, a teenager, an adolescent, an adult, someone who's a senior. That phrase mental health just really means how all those things, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your personality, helps you to cope with everything that we go through in life. All the joys that we have, all the sadness that we go through, all the life events, births, weddings, deaths, etc. Work life, school life, all of that, recreation, engaging with the community, engaging with your faith community. So that's mental health broadly. So what is mental illness? So mental illness is a condition where your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your personality impacts the way that you interact with all those things I just mentioned. From the time that you wake up in the morning till the time that you go to sleep, right? So how all those things help you to kind of maneuver through your day, whether you're in school, at work, or dealing with anybody you interact with. And we say mental illness when those things that's really from your brain impacts your ability to communicate and deal with all the people you got to deal with every day. So what's kind of interesting to me is, so we all have mental health, obviously, right? Some of us have good mental health. Some of us have fairly good mental health. And a lot of us have poor mental health. A lot of times when it comes to the fore, when you see it, is when we observe some behavior, some interaction that people are having, and we feel like they're not really doing the things that they should be doing. That's really kind of what mental illness is. And it's very common. So and you know this already, right? So like 1 in 5 persons is affected by a mental health condition every year. And the range of the diagnoses are broad, right? The most common mental illness or mental health disorder is anxiety, general anxiety, where your feelings, your thoughts, you become really anxious about the things that you got to do every single day. That's really the most common one. And so every year, about 20% of people are affected by that. The next most common is depression. And that's about 6% of the population every year that's affected by that. And of course, there is bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, ADHD, all the other terms that you're familiar with, right? Dementia, all those things are also mental health conditions, and there are like 100 different diagnoses that people can have. Today, though, I'll just stop there for a second. Is there any questions before I go on? I'm going to talk specifically about seasonal affective disorder. There is a gift card, it's $25 gift card, based upon our interaction, what I'm going to be talking about. And at the end of that, what I'll do is ask a question about something I've mentioned. And the first person who answers it gets that gift card. Typically, hopefully it's nothing that's too hard. It's really based on something I've said. When I use the slides, typically it's something on the slide, but I think the sharing was disabled, which is fine. It's just easier talking because I see that you're in the circle. And I'll give you the same information that I would as on the slide. I think that probably works. If anyone wants a slide after that, I'll send them to Claudette and she can give you the PowerPoint slides for you to look at, right? So again, about 100 different diagnoses for mental illness, mental health conditions. The most common, generalized anxiety, about 20%, depression, about 6 to probably 9%. Bipolar disorder is the next most common, about 3%. And I won't give you the rest of the numbers, okay? So what is depression? So depression is when it's a mood problem. It's a problem with your mood, right? So when your mood, your feelings, the way you feel, affects your ability to do the activities that you normally do every single day. And typically it's your mood, sadness, feeling blue, feeling down, loss of interest in your usual activities, loss of interest in interacting with the people around you at home, at work, at school, in the community. You don't want to do any of those things. And if you just think about the things that we normally do when we wake up in the morning, right? We wake up, we groom ourselves, we take a shower, we greet our loved ones, people who we're living with. We have our breakfast, we engage with the people in our home, we go to school, we go to work, whatever. So really what happens in depression is when you're down, that mood of sadness, that feeling of feeling really blue affects all of those things. You can't get out of bed, you can't eat, or you overeat, or you're irritable, or you don't want to talk to anybody. The first person that you meet downstairs or in your apartment or in your home, you feel like you're going to take their head off. You don't want to hear it. You just really don't want to deal with them. So when those emotions become so much, they happen every single day. They're interfering with the way that you communicate with the things I just mentioned. That's depression. Happens every day, persists for about 2 weeks or longer. We call that depression. And it's not that you're going to then go home and see your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your loved one, whomever that may be, your uncle, your aunt, and you think that they're depressed and you're going to say they're depressed. No. Major depression is a diagnosis that's made by a healthcare professional after they've spoken to the person, spoken to you, taken a history, talked to you about some of the stuff that's happening, talked to you about potential substance use. Are you using alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, heroin, some things that we know that obviously it can affect your mood, right? Whatever substances that might be. Get a history about, what has happened to you in the past, your childhood history. Have you been exposed to some trauma? Be they intimate partner violence, parental violence, violence in the community, anything that's basically happened to you. They kind of put it all together and they will make a diagnosis about what's happening with you obviously involved. And then what should then happen is there's no point in getting a diagnosis or naming something and then not saying, okay, this is what I'm feeling. This is what has happened to me. I may be using substance and I want to get better. And then you actually engage with the healthcare provider about a plan about what you're going to do to get back to that place of wellness, right? You don't want to just get the diagnosis and walk out the door. What you really want to engage with that person, that healthcare provider, is what can I do? What can we do as a team to get to that place back of wellness? And those things they suggest may include psychotherapy, which is a fancy word for talk therapy. It's talking. And there are different types of therapies within that. It could mean medication. It could mean meditation. It could mean alternative medicines. It could mean yoga. It could mean music therapy. It could mean equine therapy. It could mean a whole bunch of different things that we're going to recommend that you do. But what we do is we sit with you for the adults and even for the teenagers, right? We sit with you in terms of, here's a diagnosis. Maybe we need to do some testing to make sure it's not drugs, it's not your blood sugar, it's not your thyroid, it's not because you have a tumor in your head. Maybe, if the physical exam suggests that there are other things going on. But once you make the diagnosis, then you're going to actually have an action plan, a treatment plan about what are the things you want to do. And in your toolkit would be the things that you've just experienced. It could be yoga's in the toolkit. It could be that journalism in the toolkit. It could be that psychotherapy is in the toolkit. It could be that we recommend physical activity. You come to the club and you dance for an hour. It could mean all of those things, right? And it could also mean medication. So that's just depression broadly. Okay, so seasonal affective disorder is a specific type of depression that happens with a change in seasons. And so people talk about the winter blues. As soon as the sun goes down, or the days there's less sunlight, people who are living like we are in the north, right? In a colder climate, we can tell. As soon as it happens, fall's happening, winter's coming, we can tell there's something going on with us in terms of our thoughts, how we feel, our mood, and whether or not we want to engage with anybody. You know, sometimes we isolate ourselves. We don't want to go to school. We don't want to go to work. We don't want to talk to anybody, right? So we're depressed, or it could be that you're irritable. You're anxious. The first person asks you a very simple thing and you're flying off the handle. So something is changing with your mood. So seasonal affective disorder is that type of depression that really happens with the change in the seasons when it's getting cold. About 3 million persons in the US every year have that diagnosis. There's also a small cadre of people who have the less often, but the opposite. They get their seasonal affective disorder when spring and summer starts. So it's, but the most people with S.A.D, seasonal affective disorder, it really happens within the colder climate. And they can link it, they can link it. A lot of times they're self-diagnosing it. They're linking it to the change in their exposure to sunlight and the shorter days that winter brings. So it's very common for folks who live in the northern hemisphere, those folks who are above the equator and going further north. It's said to be 4 times more common in women than men. And some of that might just be, again, you know, we need to do a talk on just mental health and even physical health in men, because part of the variability, I think, is the fact that a lot of men, and I'm just talking to the brothers right now, right? A lot of us, we're going through stuff and we're suffering too, but we're not gonna tell our loved ones. We're not going to tell the minister or a faith-based leader. We're not going to tell a close friend, and we suffer, and I would say unnecessarily. We suffer unnecessarily because we don't want to tell anybody. We don't want to see a healthcare provider. And so we sit there suffering unnecessarily, and then you see it coming out in behaviors that are really not healthy for us. And we can talk about it in many different ways, right? Either you're under-eating, overeating, doing some things which are risky, substance use, alcohol use, really just not good, because it's going to really impact your life, because the later that you're trying to deal with it, you're dealing with these things by yourself, which you really shouldn't. And eventually it affects your work life, your school life, and your relationships. And ultimately you're acting out, you're doing some behavior that's not in your best interest and not in your family and your loved one's best interest. But part of the issue is we have been socialized not to seek help, not to say we need help. And so we suffer unnecessarily in silence. So that 4 times number, I think that's part of what's really going on, right? Women, I think it's because the way they have been socialized, both with their parents and their mom, and the people they're growing up with, their girlfriends, their friends, it's more acceptable for them to talk out and talk through their feelings. Not that they're asking the adult for advice, but typically it's just easier, I think, just because the way they've been socialized, to talk about what they're feeling. Men, we are for the most part, when you start to do that, a lot of people in our circle, in our lives, shut us down. that's not something that men do. We don't want to talk, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to hear about it, etc. That's an entire different conversation that we can have. So I think that's kind of what's in that number. But seasonal affective disorder is really just that. It happens with a change in seasons, about 3 million persons every year. And why do we think it's related to sun exposure? There's some things that the sun does. And there are a couple of chemicals in the brain that is thought to be affected by sunlight, and one in the rest of your body. Serotonin, which you probably have heard about, is a chemical in the brain that has to do with mood and mood regulation. And there's the thought that when you get exposed to less sunlight, that serotonin level drops, which then impacts how your brain is functioning and working appropriately. That's also true in depression and other mood disorders, right? So serotonin. The other chemical in our brain that's affected by the sun and sunlight is melatonin. And so when you get that decreased exposure to melatonin, the same thing kind of happens. The brain cells, the synapse, the chemicals in your brain, that balance is kind of off. And then that results in those feelings, all the feelings I just talked about in terms of the changes in your mood and your feelings and whatever else you're feeling. So serotonin and melatonin are two things which we know are affected by sunlight. The other thing that is also affected by sunlight is vitamin D. So for a lot of people, vitamin D, and people say, well, let's just talk to the people who are darker complexion, right? Persons who are in the African diaspora or the Latin American, that culture. People say, well, really, why do they have vitamin D deficiency? I mean, they should be better able to absorb the sunlight, but the truth of the matter is, if you spend more time indoors, especially in the north, you're indoors, right? You're working indoors, you're working from home, you're not outside doing any activities during that time. You may go out to shovel your snow, but really the sun exposure that you're having is a little bit less. So vitamin D is also a problem. And just because you're darker skinned like myself, doesn't mean that you're not vitamin D deficient, because guess what? You're not outside. When you're working from home, you have all the blinds are drawn, right? You're not sitting by sunlight. You're not having your meal by the sunlight to let the light come in. The blinds are drawn, the curtains are drawn, you're living in a cave, you're in your basement. You're really having less exposure to sunlight. And just hang on to that thought for a second, because one of the therapies we're going to recommend is, okay, if it's this is seasonal affective disorder. If some of it is from serotonin, a lower level of serotonin, or melatonin, or vitamin D, really are related to sunlight, is there something that we can do with light or sunlight in terms of our treatment and therapy? And the answer is yes. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a second to see if there are any questions before I talk about risk factors and then treatment. Any questions?
Basically, for the pandemic till now, I know that the mental health issues have spiked. What, I'm gonna say not percentage, but how has that been affected by seasonal depression versus other things, and what has been the factors in such a spike, but what have you seen from your research?
That's a great question. So what has happened with really since the end of 2019, 2020, right? With the COVID pandemic, and really that's really what has happened. So because the COVID pandemic disrupted really our everyday life, the life that you knew before, it's affected not only mental health, but physical health. And so part of, I can't give you a number. We know the numbers have increased, right? Because we know the numbers in terms of mental health disorders, substance use, drug overdose deaths have increased since 2020 to 2023. Some of that data is lagging for us to give you a specific number, like it's 5 or 10 or 20% or 30%, but definitely it's increased since 2020. All mental health diagnosis, all substance use disorders, whether it's alcohol or opiates or some other drug, the overdose deaths have increased. And any mental health condition that you can think of, those rates have increased, especially in our youth, for a couple of reasons, right? We're human beings. We're used to being, no matter how we feel, most of us want to interact with somebody, right? We don't want to have a meeting 24/7 on Zoom, right? We actually want to have, like you did, we want to have an interaction with people in a circle, with yoga, with journaling, with dancing, going to the bar, doing the things that typically we'll be doing, but really because we've been isolated, we've lost that human connection. And especially for teenagers and youth, that's really important for them. The other thing I think why it spiked is if you were, if part of what has happened to you, whether it's intimate partner violence or depression or whatever you've been exposed to, is part of what's happening in your household and your ability to respond to it and your ability to treat it. If you're stuck with that abuser, with that person who's always saying negative things about you, and there's no escape, you're really kind of trapped. So there's a couple of reasons, I think, why we're seeing the rates going up, right? The pandemic, the isolation, that loss of human connectivity that we really do crave. So that's the reason why it is. The good thing about the pandemic, if there's any good thing about it, I think is because it shed light on a problem that has been in existence for thousands of years that really should have been addressed before, but now because it's really kind of shed light on it, there is much more attention to it. So you may also recognize, for example, or know, recently the Health and Human Services, the federal government, for the healthcare arm of the federal government, allocated about $245 million to address mental health conditions specifically for youth, because we recognize what's been going on since 2020 up to now, and it's not getting any better. So like I said before, there's no point in recognizing the problem, saying we're concerned about it, but not putting in a treatment plan and putting in the resources to make a difference. So that's really what's happening in the background. So that's a great question. That's a great point, and thanks for bringing that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rhule. The next question is, you mentioned men suffering SAD as well as women, predominantly women, but men as well. So how do you suggest that we outreach and engage men in this process of sharing survival kits?
That's a great question. So, so what was I watching? And this guy did a men. He didn't call it mental health. It was like it's not a man cave. I think this was on Queen Sugar, right? So Queen Sugar, and the character Hollywood, his wife has like a donut shop, and what he thought he would do was he would start a men's health group, and it's not called mental health, but really it's a space where the men can come. It's a safe space, and they can talk about what's going on. But that's one of the ways to, one of the many ways to do it. One of the things I think that is we should not forget is the fact that I applaud the West Indian Social Club and Wheeler Health for doing this, because when you have this session, you tape them, right? So you're communicating to an audience, both men and women. They can go back in the privacy of their own home and they can talk about it. But I think what you've done, though, is you've created a safe space where men and women can come and talk about what's going on, what's happening to them. And it helps with the destigmatization of just that topic, period. Right? So it's that, plus it's potentially having a men's only group, right? But I think when you open the conversation like you've done, I think you guys need to get a Nobel Peace Prize, actually, for doing that for them. And I know people don't want to talk about the bar. You have a bar, right? We know people drink alcohol, so let's not say it's not part of socialization. The issue with alcohol really has to do more with your diet, what else is going on, and not drinking to excess. But let's be real. People come to the bar and they socialize. And they may have one drink with their friend, or they go to the ballroom, they have one drink with their friend, half a drink with their friend, they eat something. Hopefully they're sober enough and they drive home or they walk home. But you have a social space. No matter what people want to say it's there, it's a forum for folks to be able to socialize and talk about what's going on with them. But what we also do in our talks is we also talk about, is there a healthy way? And we can talk about that, right? So is there a healthy way to consume alcohol? Is there a healthy way to consume cannabis? Some people say no, there's no healthy way, period, right? And some people say, it depends, but another time at a time. All I'm saying is that you have I think you have a fabulous community center that really gives men, women, teenagers a space where they can feel safe. They're going to come to somebody who knows them, knows their culture. You don't have to, if they're talking about something that's in patois or whatever they're talking about, you don't have to stop to explain what that means. It's just that familiarity with the culture and the people. I mean, folks call it what? Cultural sensitivity and cultural competency. You have that. And I think that is a feather in your cap. I think it's something that you should definitely let folks know. Look, we're here, and we're just not here dancing every Saturday. But guess what? Physical activity and dancing and yoga, that's just the same as if you dance for an hour to a nice song, that's just the same as if you went to the gym and were on the elliptical machine for an hour. So don't discount the things that you're actually doing. That actually is healthy and helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Rhule. So we're fulfilling our purpose, or one of our objectives at the club, to serve the community and to educate, so not only to entertain. The next question is about vitamin D. I've heard somewhere that they're considering it to be a hormone or as important as that. Could you expound on that, please?
Right, so you're right. So vitamin D is a hormone, right? So it's the vitamin D is made in a couple of places, really in the kidney and in the liver. So, and you have something that comes before the vitamin D. There are a couple of different vitamin Ds, vitamin D1, vitamin A, D2, but the bottom line is the pro hormone or the pro chemical goes into your kidney. There's some interaction from your gut and from your skin that really turns it into the active form of vitamin D so it can do what it needs to do in your body. And there are many different organs that need vitamin D. You do need that sun exposure to activate some of it. You do need a kidney that works. You also need a liver that works. So in that sense, it's a hormone because it's a hormone just means a chemical that is having a function, some other function, any part of your body. So in that sense, it is a hormone. But it's a couple of different organs, right? Your skin, your kidney, your liver, and then it goes to the site of action that it needs to do.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
So on the topic of vitamin D, I heard that the darker your skin means the longer time you may have to spend outside before absorption occur while you're in the sun. So if you're a light-skinned person, that means you spend 20 minutes versus maybe a darker-skinned person may spend an hour to get the right absorption of vitamin D. Is that so?
I'm not aware of a specific in anything I've read or any research that says because you're darker skin, you need to be out there for an hour or 2 hours versus someone who's lighter skin. I think what the data says is just because you're dark skinned and doesn't mean that you shouldn't be out there, that you don't need vitamin, that you don't need sunlight. So people assume, well, because you're darker skin and your skin actually absorbs more of the sunlight, right? And we don't get burned and we don't get tanned. Well, we do get tanned, right? But we don't get sunburned, that we just don't need to be outside, but that's not true. But I don't know of a study that says if you're darker skin, it's an hour versus if you're lighter skin, it's 20. Not to say that it doesn't exist, I just don't know that number. But I will make a note of it and I'll research to see if that's the case. But really the bottom line is just because you're dark skin doesn't mean that you shouldn't be getting sunlight, period. And a lot of Africa, and a lot of Black, the other issue with vitamin D is related to, not to get too sidetracked, is diabetes. So you might hear that in the news. So part of the thinking, and I'm not gonna, don't say it's absolutely true, part of the thinking is maybe part of the reason why a lot of us have diabetes is really linked to vitamin D. So that thought is also out there. And the one thing I would say you should walk away with is don't let your healthcare provider tell you because you're darker skin, they don't need to do a vitamin D level because that might not be true. The only way you're gonna know if a person has low vitamin D is if you actually do the blood test, if you actually do a test to figure it out. I'm gonna jump ahead before I take any of the questions because I wanna just talk a little quickly about, so the three things I talked about were the serotonin that's low, melatonin that's low, and vitamin D that's low related to, and we think it's all because of the sun exposure. Just to talk about treatment specifically. I'm gonna kind of work backwards, right? So because we think it's because seasonal affective disorder has to do with sun exposure and light, when we recommend a treatment to you, part of that may also include obviously sun exposure, but we also have what's called a light exposure. It's a light box. So you can buy a light box on Amazon or anywhere. Talk to your healthcare provider to be sure it's the right type of light box you're buying. But what it's trying to do is expose you to enough sunlight as soon as you get it in the morning to basically help with the therapy, including the other things you're going to do. So one of the things, of course, because it's light therapy, a light box or natural sunlight, that you can actually do, right? That's one. The other things you're going to do in terms of in your toolkit are the things you just did in terms of depression. Any physical activity, whether it's yoga, any physical activity, swimming, jogging, whatever you would normally do for physical activity, dancing, you're going to do those things too. Journaling is good because journaling helps you to write down your thoughts, your emotions, and helps you to get a perspective of what's going on. Just like when you go to a mental health provider for psychotherapy. And psychotherapy is talk therapy, right? You're going to sit with a trained professional and they're going to ask you about what happened to you, what's been happening to you. They're going to ask you about your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. And you're going to describe those things. And hopefully what they're going to help you do is help you put all of those things in perspective about what's going on in your life and helping you to figure out how you're going to get to a healthy place, That's what talk therapy does. And there's a whole host of different modalities in talk therapy. So, but that's really what psychotherapy is, right? Of course, medication. If we talked about that, it's serotonin and melatonin. There are medications that specifically act on those two things. There are antidepressants that are specific for serotonin, again, a chemical in your brain. And there are a couple of different classes of antidepressants, one called a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And all that basically means is when that drug, when the serotonin gets to where the two nerves meet, that drug prevents it from being reabsorbed into the blood, into the nerve cell. So it stays in that space long enough to basically do what it needs to do. So that drug basically prevents the serotonin from being reabsorbed. The other type of drug is what's called a serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, basically doing the same thing. It's making the serotonin and norepinephrine stay in that space longer, so it can basically does its own thing. Melatonin, again, is a thing you probably have heard about. People take melatonin tablets. Some of it you can buy over the counter, 5 milligram, 10 milligram. People use it for sleep. That's also a potential medication. But really, any of the antidepressants, potentially, that would give you for any depression would work. Melatonin also would be the possibility, right? So physical activity. The one thing we didn't talk about, two things are diet, a healthy diet, right? That you would really be doing anyway, right? For anything, just a healthy diet, keeping a healthy weight, watching what you're eating, substances you really don't want, most of those things in your diet, right? And the last thing would be alternative therapy, which we talked about. Some people use herbal medicine. And the one thing I would just tell you, some people take roots wine. They go to Jamaica or they go to Puerto Rico and they get roots. I'm not sure what's in roots, right? It's some root and whatever. And some people swear by it. I don't know, right? But whatever is in your toolkit to help you to get healthy, that's really what we want you to do. The one caveat I would say is, though, if you're doing your roots wine, if you're doing a herbal medicine, you need to let the healthcare provider know, because if he or she is going to prescribe a medication, a lot of those things are going to interact with something they're going to give you, right? So just be sure that you're with somebody that is culturally competent, or just volunteer. Doc, I'm taking roots wine, and I took whatever, or I mixed up some ginger, like with the COVID, right? I mixed up some ginger. When I'm telling you ginger, turmeric, and a splash of red rum, and you won't get COVID. I don't know. I don't know. Okay? So just be honest. I'm not taking the vaccine because that's what they told me to do. I mean, just be honest. And hopefully the healthcare provider will be honest to you and say, look, we know that don't work. But if you want to take the vaccine and the roots wine, I'm all there for you. I'm going to stop there and have you ask questions. I said.
Okay, so you mentioned that there is seasonal depression in the warmer seasons too, but you're talking about like the sun. So why is it that some people have it in the warmer seasons? What's the science behind that?
That's a great question. Are you going to be a scientist?
Yeah, actually, I'm in high school and I take AP psychology, so yeah, that's where I'm going. So
there you go. Because when you read about, no matter how deep you search about seasonal affective disorder, we do recognize that some people get it in the winter and some people get it when it's spring and summer, and you're like, okay, well, why? I mean, if it's really all sun related, right, you would think it wouldn't happen when it's in the middle of the summer, but some of that does happen. And the caveat with every health condition you talk about, whether it's mental health, physical health, is there are 7 billion people on the planet, and we realize that there's some genetic, even though we may all look alike and we may all act alike, some people have different genetic variability and susceptibility, and some medications that you take will work on my body, and even if we're twins, it will work on me and it won't work on you. So the bottom line is there's more research to be done, but in the background of really every health condition is the fact that there is some biological genetic variability that's there that we don't fully yet understand. That's kind of the, the nice answer, I guess I would say. But it's a great question because people will say, well, drink garlic can lower your blood pressure. Yeah, it might work for you, but guess what? It don't work for me.
Doctor, I had a thought about, just to piggyback off what you said. I was thinking that maybe, the depression going into the sunnier seasons may be linked to an anxiety, as far as, some people may have anxiety about their body, may have anxiety about wearing certain clothing now. So you're going out into a hotter season and you may feel the depression because of that, and that kind of like, was ringing in my head about maybe a reason why. And I wanted to ask you, can that be, related to that kind of depression when the season is changing into a sunnier?
You read the textbook.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, right. So some of the risk factors for, and some of the reasons why people may be more prone to seasonal affective disorder is exactly what you just mentioned. It's the fact that just that sense of anxiety and our thoughts, etc., and how that actually impacts the way that we cope. And if you just want to think about what I kind of find interesting is really we're all water. We're all water, electricity. Just if you just think about the basic things of what we're made up of: water, electricity, and chemicals. I want to say running around, but really chemicals running around in our bodies, right? That helps us to create a thought. Every single thought you create, it's because of a shift of water or chemicals, sodium, potassium, serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, gabapentin, something that's causing that. So it kind of begs the question is, if you have that 2-week period of persistent anxiety about December 21st, it's the start of winter, that thought that you're having is really then resulting in some chemical change in your mind and in your body that subsequently depletes whatever it's depleting. It's going to use all the salt up, all the serotonin up, but 2 weeks from now, bam, you're in seasonal depression or any type of depression. I just find that the psychology of all of that is really interesting. And you can make it really philosophical. I mean, if folks talk about the creator and God, and again, another time, how is that, how do you explain that, right? How do you explain it?
Yeah, I have another question. So I'm figuring that you got educated in college. So I wanted to know, what field did you go into to educate yourself of the science of this mental psychology? Because I'm interested and I like what you're talking about.
Right, so I'd say I'd answer your question 2 ways. One is Right. So there's formal education, which I did. So I went to college. I got a degree in biology and Spanish, and I went to med school. And I'm certified as an internal medicine physician, but really only but worked in emergency medicine, right? So there was that formal education where I sat in somebody's class and they told me what was going on. But also because I lived with a brother with a mental health condition. My brother had schizophrenia, a mental illness. And that means that he basically had hallucinations where he heard voices, saw things that didn't exist, and a whole host of other mental health conditions. Because of my life experience and what was happening to me, I then read about it, and then read broadly about mental health conditions. And then really now, because of the internet, what I do, I ask Siri or I Google it. You know, what is seasonal depression? Or anything I want to find out. Typically, before I was in a formal class, that was great because I think you have to do that too. But a lot of the education that you can do for yourself is using your phone, your laptop, and the internet, and the West Indian Social Club as a means of supplementing that information and that education. The information that you get doesn't always have to come in that classroom. So just like if you're going to be a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychologist, anything you're interested in, Google it and read it online. What does a psychiatrist do? What does an emergency medicine physician do? And if I need something that I need to like see physically, like I wanted to figure out like how to cook Jamaican rice and peas, I went on YouTube. YouTube, how to prepare Jamaican rice and peas. And you'd be surprised the amount of information that's out there to help you with some things that you want to know. The formal education is good. The source of the information also, you got to be careful, right? Because you just don't want to go out there and listen to anybody who just has something out there, right? But pretty much if it's scientific, research-based, evidence-based, it's been what's called peer-reviewed, and it's a reputable organization, then typically it should be good information. And so that's what I'd say to any of you. Use your phone, your laptop, Google it. That's what I do. Google it, Siri it, ask. And from the questions you just asked, again, you can always go back and check me. You know, Dr. Rhule said it's not 20 minutes versus 60 minutes for vitamin D. What I'm going to do at the very end is go look. Is there something that says that? And who said it? You know, where is that study? And was it is it reproducible? You know, is it somebody who is really legitimate, right? The CDC, the FDA, you know, a well-known university, any university, the West Indian Social Club, where is the reference coming from? Not just from John Brown who said XYZ and he's on the street corner. Not that that's wrong either. But then the question is it reproducible? Did, you know, how did he come to that information? What data did you use? And does it like logically make sense from what they're saying? So the more that you educate yourself, the better off you are. And don't always wait for the teacher to do that, because sometimes they don't know either. Like I didn't know the answer to the 26. Sometimes I don't know. I gotta go look. I don't know. I gotta go look.
Dr. Rhule, we're at 3 minutes after 5 if you want to do the giveaway.
Oh, there are two questions?
Yeah, you can do 2 questions.
The first one is very easy. What number of persons in the US every year get seasonal affective disorder?
6%. Yeah. You got a person.
Number, no.
Oh,
The number, it's millions of persons in the US.
Yeah, I'm not.
All right, yeah. All right,
9 million.
No. No.
3 million.
3 million. 3 million. So let's talk about name two alternative treatment that you can use for S.A.D. Any treatment that you can use.
Yoga, and you said not aquaponics. That's what yoga and dancing. You know,
Yoga and what?
aquatherapy. You said that.
Okay, light therapy. Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, you're welcome, sir. You're welcome. Take care. Have a great end of the week, rest of the week.
Let me wrap it up real quick, guys. Let's thank you, Dr. Rhule, again. Thank you for being so faithful to the West Indian Social Club and the Wheeler Clinic Initiative. You have been great ever since, and tonight was no exception. Thank everyone here in the room. Thank everyone here in the room for showing up and showing out. We had 2 giveaways and it was awesome. We had fun tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again next month when we have our next presentation.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.